You ever notice how most families run like a sitcom? There's always the favorite, the wild card, the one who fixes everything, and the one who keeps the lights on but somehow fades right into the background. That's me, Eli. 34 years old, lifetime member of Responsible Sibling Anonymous. Not the favorite, never the golden child, definitely not the wild one, just the guy who ticks all the responsible boxes. Pays on time, remembers birthdays, takes care of things no one asks about. That's my role, reliable, invisible, quietly handling things while everyone else is busy being loud. My family, they're the exact opposite. They live for noise, crowds, big group hugs, and always act glossy and close knit, like it's all great until you peek behind the curtain. Real problems shoved deep under the rug with a smile. I'm not an outsider exactly. I've always been invited, but if you looked at the family photo albums or the inside jokes, I was sort of there but not central. They'd never say it, but the message was clear. We love you, but from a bit of a distance. Like, it's cool you exist, but please don't expect a starring role. Now, Mason, my younger brother, he's the family's main character, charismatic as they come, reckless, bold. If there was trouble to be found, Mason found it and still landed on his feet. My parents, yeah, they adored it. He'd blow up a semester in college, lose a couple jobs back to back, then drift right back home at 28. No panic, just more excuses and honestly more pride in how unique he is. Me, I paid my own way through everything, kept the same job over a decade, sent checks when dad's hours got cut. It didn't count. None of it moved the needle. Does it hit me? Sometimes. But I got used to rolling with it. Smile through the jokes, nod along while folks tease, Eli, lighten up, don't work so much. I hoped, quietly, that if I just kept showing up, I'd one day earn a real place at the table in the photos, in the traditions, in the parts of family you don't have to ask to be included in. But life had other plans. Turns out you can't just keep giving and expect people to suddenly see you differently. My biggest wake up call? It started like a lot of things do in my family, with a favor I couldn't refuse, a dinner invitation, and a sense that maybe this would finally be the night I felt like family for real. What I didn't know was that it was all about to unravel. You think you're used to being sidelined until the world shows you just how far some people will take it. And let's just say when it finally got to me, it hit harder than I could have ever expected. So picture this, it's early fall, and my phone rings. Caller ID. Mom, she's got that syrupy sweet tone she saves for when she wants something big but wants you to think it's small. Eli, sweetheart, hope you're free. We're hosting this beautiful engagement dinner for Mason and Brooke. It's going to be such a special night. I barely finished saying yes before she switched gears, lowering her voice like she was about to share deep government secrets. And since you're so organized, would you mind putting the deposit down for the reservation? Just to hold it, you know. We'll pay you back. Classic move. I should have seen it coming, right? In my family, we'll pay you back is code for your bank account's about to take a hit and you'll never see that money again. Still, I said yes. I always said yes. I called the restaurant this gorgeous rooftop spot with city views, the kind of place my parents would normally never splurge on. Booked a private dining area for 20 people, put my own card down for the $500 deposit, made sure every little detail was locked in. I told myself it was worth it. Mason's big moment. Maybe this time I'd actually get to be part of something that felt like Time's family times and not just a background character. When the day arrived, I didn't half step it. I dressed sharp, dark navy suit, crisp shirt, cufflinks I'd been saving, picked out a really nice bottle of champagne, even designed a custom card with Mason and Brooks initials. Arrived right on time, 7 o'clock sharp, not a minute late. Walking into that rooftop was like stepping into a postcard. String lights over every table, fresh floral centerpieces making the whole space bloom, jazz band warming up in the corner, city skyline glowing behind them. I spotted the family instantly. My parents, Mason, Brooke, her whole side of the family, even some friends I only half recognized. They all had drinks, laughing, celebrating like it was a scene from a movie. For a second, I actually thought maybe times was the night everything would click. I walked over, champagne in hand, ready to be part of the celebration. And that's when Mason turned, giving me his signature smirk. Oh, hey, glad you made it. Before I could even hand him the champagne or soak in a single ounce of the atmosphere, he pointed over my shoulder toward a sad little folding chair right next to a trash bin. Sorry, this table's for family only, he said. And I swear, the way he smiled, I could tell he thought this was hilarious. I froze for a split second, waiting for someone to jump in, mom, dad, anyone. But all I got was her familiar, tight smile and dad's awkward little toast in my direction. Nobody moved to include me. A few people laughed. In that moment, I realized this wasn't a joke at all. They meant it. Out of 20 seats, not even one had my name on it. So I walked over, set down my bottle beside the trash, and Saturday didn't take off my coat, didn't even bother to get comfortable. That's how the night started. And trust me, it only goes downhill from here because you wouldn't believe what happened next. From the moment I sat down in that sad little folding chair beside the trash can, it felt like the whole room was set up to make sure I knew exactly where I belonged. One second, I'm thinking maybe someone will get the joke, wave me over, tell Mason to quit it, and the next, I'm clicking the metal chair into place, taking my seat while everyone's already raising glasses, plates clinking, voices skipping over me like I'm invisible. I tried to pass it off, tried to laugh with them, tell myself I was overthinking, but every glance in my direction was either nervous or avoided. The waiter came by, polite but confused. Are you with the party? He asked, darting a look at my suit like maybe I'd crashed the wrong event. I nodded, forcing out a quiet, yeah, I'm with them. And he gave me a glass of water like that settled the matter. Meanwhile, I watched trays of appetizers drift past shrimp cocktail, fancy crostini, stuff I couldn't even pronounce. Not once did anyone ask if I'd like something or if I even wanted a refill. The main table was a whole different world. I was close enough to catch bits of conversation, laughter, the soft edge of an inside joke, but miles away from joining in. Mason was in his element, of course, leaning back, mug in hand, telling some elaborate story about how he first met Brooke. People were hanging on every word, their parents practically beaming. Mom teared up when Brooke called her the best future mother-in-law a girl could ask for. Dad kept jumping in with old stories about Mason as a kid, sometimes even about me, but you could tell which son the stories were really about. There were little jabs slipped in as jokes. Eli probably doesn't remember. He was always buried in a book. Or, well, Eli always liked the serious stuff. He kept his head down while Mason kept us laughing. Everyone chuckled along. I took it. I always took it. And maybe for a while, I even believed that doing all the responsible things would make them see me someday, see me as something more than just the emergency contact or the backup wallet. But sitting there, coat on, bottle of champagne untouched, I realized the truth. I was just the safe option, always included, never actually welcomed. That hurt in a way I hadn't expected. I found myself flicking through my phone, pretending to check messages, anything, to avoid looking directly at what was happening. No one brought me a plate. No one asked if I was hungry, not even a spare napkin. A waiter with a tray of mini desserts paused, hesitated, then offered me a polite nod and turned away. I caught myself wishing I could just disappear, shrink down, and vanish into the night so none of this would have to hurt. But I stayed. Maybe out of stubbornness, maybe just because I wanted to see if anyone would notice or remember I existed for just a minute. 2 hours slipped by. I listened as Mason gave a big speech about how grateful he was to have his closest people around him. I watched him clink champagne glasses with a room full of family and friends, Mom teary-eyed, Dad nodding in proud agreement, Brooke glowing by his side. Even her family seemed totally swept up in it all. Nobody looked my way. For a long stretch, nobody even glanced in my direction. Even the jazz band, tucked in a corner, was winding down with a slow tune as the evening sun finally disappeared behind the skyline. And then the cake came out. Some crazy, multi-layered masterpiece with gold flakes and fruit carved like little flowers. Everyone oot and ahed as they snapped photos and shared slices. I just watched, trying not to feel the sting. A few crumbs dropped on the floor next to my chair. My only company all night was that lonely trash bin. I could smell it every time the breeze shifted. Eventually, the room began to settle, voices getting quieter, plates being stacked. That's when the waiter reappeared, discreet as ever, holding that little leather folder, something I'd seen 1,000 times but never felt more ominous. He hovered at the head table, glancing uncertainly between Mason, Dad, and then the card on file. Finally, he made his way over to me. Where else would he go? My card was the one that opened this whole show. He leaned in close, dropping his voice. Excuse me, sir. The total for the event is $3,218. Should I run the same card for the final amount? And I swear, at that moment, the entire room pivoted. Every laugh died. Every fork froze midair. All eyes were on me. I glanced up at Mason. He flashed that casual smirk like this was all routine. Oh, yeah, Eli's got it. A shrug, barely more than a breath. For a heartbeat, I just stared. Honestly, in that split second, 100 thoughts ran through my head. Old birthdays, Christmas mornings, everything I'd done to help these people, all the times I'd wished they'd finally treat me like family. Then something hardened. I straightened, forced a slow, steady smile, and said just loud enough for everyone to hear, "Not my table." I was told this was for family only. The silence that followed was almost comical if it wasn't heartbreaking. Mason froze, mouth hanging open. Mom's eyes narrowed, those lips pressed together the way she always did when she didn't want to be involved. Dad looked away, tapping his glass. Brooke's dad straightened, watching closely. You could feel the temperature in the room drop a few degrees. Even the staff paused, sensing something real had landed like a meteor. The waiter tried to keep it together. But you made the reservation, sir. Yeah, paid the deposit too, but I'm not with them. I'm over here, I said, waving at the trash can. Apparently, that's where I belong. No one moved. Brooke's dad finally leaned into Mason, voice sharp and low. You invited this man, sat him next to the trash, and now expect him to pay? Mason had nothing to say, the first time in years I'd ever seen him speechless. Mom straightened in her chair, her go-to line coming on fast. Let's not blow this out of proportion. Eli's just being dramatic. He's always been sensitive. I almost laughed honestly. That was the fallback anytime something real broke through the surface. It was easier to pretend I was just sensitive. But for the first time, I didn't shrink. I didn't swallow it. I stood up, coat still on, untouched bottle in hand, and looked right at my brother, right at my parents, right at everyone who'd let this happen. I didn't eat. I didn't drink. I wasn't welcome, I said calmly. So I'm not paying. The tension stretched and snapped, every person in the room forced to sit in it. For once, their awkwardness wasn't my problem. I'd lived in this uncomfortable silence my entire life. And deep down, I realized maybe I was finally done being the one who turned everything into a joke just so nobody else felt bad. This wasn't a joke, not tonight. The waiter, grateful to have a decision made, nodded and stepped back. Mason flustered, spat, "You're making a scene." But I shook my head. No, you're just not used to anyone saying no. Then I picked up my things and walked toward the elevator, feeling lighter with every step, even as I heard chairs scraping back, even as I heard my name whispered in a dozen bewildered voices. Funny how, after all those years of wanting a seat at that table, I didn't even want it anymore. Not if I had to beg. That's how the night ended for me, but the aftermath? Well, that was a whole new story. Because as I left, I knew everything was about to change, and this time it might finally be for the better. The moment that waiter asked if I wanted to put the final charge on my card is when everything changed. I watched him approach Mason's table, the leather folder, with the bill clutched lightly in his hand like it was something fragile or radioactive. He paused, eyes flicking from Mason to the card on file. Then, with a polite hesitation, he stepped over toward me. "Excuse me, sir," he said softly, barely above a whisper. "The total for the event is $3,218. Should I run the same card for the final amount?" Suddenly, the laughter died. Glasses stopped clinking. Conversations hung in the air like a trapped breath as every eye turned on me. Mason raised an eyebrow, the smirk curling on his lips as though this was just another expected part of the evening. "Oh, yeah," he said casually, his voice dripping with nonchalance. "Eli's got it." Like it was no big deal, like he expected me to pay up for the party I hadn't been included in. For a moment, I just stared. It wasn't the price I could afford it, and I probably covered more than my share over the years. No, it was the principle, the message behind the math. I set down the champagne bottle I'd held tight all night and let out a slow, calm smile, the kind you settle into when you finally stop swallowing yourself to fit in. Then I spoke, not too loud, but just enough for every person in that room to hear. "Not my table," I said, steady and clear. "I was told this was for family only." What happened next felt like the air snapped in half. Mason's mouth opened slightly, stunned, as if he forgot I was even there. My mom's lips tightened into that sharp, tight smile she uses when she wants to look polite but is actually furious. Dad sat straighter, probably realizing this was much bigger than he'd expected. Brooke's dad furrowed his brow, clearly uncomfortable. Even the waiter seemed caught between shock and awkwardness, his eyes flicking between me and the main table like he was trying to find the right thing to do but couldn't. "Sir," he said, voice hesitant, "you made the reservation." "I did," I nodded, voice still calm but firm. "And I paid the deposit." I paused, making sure the words landed. "But I'm not with them. I'm at the side table." I gestured subtly toward the trash can beside me where they apparently thought I belonged. For a beat, no one moved. The silence was deafening. You could almost hear jaws hitting the floor. Then my mom finally spoke, a voice low and shaky. "Eli, what are you doing?" I shrugged, steadying myself. "Following the seating chart, Mom. Mason said this table was family only." I took him at his word. I looked at the waiter. "I didn't eat, I didn't drink, I wasn't welcome, so no, I won't be paying." Mason's smirk cracked like cracked glass, turning into something darker, something ugly. "Don't be ridiculous, it's just a joke," he snapped. "You always take things so personally." But the room had gone quiet, dead quiet. Even the jazz band seemed to be winding down, playing a low, awkward hum in the corner. All eyes were on me. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking away from their judgment. "Yeah," I said slowly. "That's the problem. You think everything's a joke as long as it's at someone else's expense." Brooke looked confused, like she was just realizing something real was happening right in front of her. Her father, a stiff man in a blazer, who hadn't said much all night, gave Mason a sharp look. He asked, eyebrows raised, "You invited this man to your engagement dinner and sat him next to the trash can?" Mason scoffed, looking to my mom for backup, but she straightened in her seat, smiling tightly. "Let's not blow things out of proportion. Eli is just being dramatic. He's always been sensitive." That line hit me because it was true. Always that excuse. He's just sensitive. He's just tired. He's just overreacting. Anything to avoid admitting that something cruel had happened, something they'd all allowed to happen. The waiter cleared his throat, back again. "Sorry to interrupt, but the restaurant needs to process the bill before closing the tab on the private room. If the card on file isn't used, I'll need an alternate." Silence. I shook my head and started walking toward the elevator, every step feeling like a punching blow. Then Dad finally said, "Eli, come on. You've already paid half. Might as well finish it." That sentence felt like a slap. I turned around, meeting his eyes. "You're right, Dad. I did pay the deposit. I called 3 restaurants to find the perfect rooftop like Mason wanted. I picked the date around his football schedule. I ordered custom flowers because Mom said fake ones looked cheap. I paid the $500 non-refundable deposit without blinking, and I showed up on time alone in a suit to support my brother." I stepped closer, voice lowered, but still loud enough for everyone to hear. "And what did I get in return? A folding chair next to a garbage bin and a, 'Sorry, this table's for family only.'" I turned to Mason. "Now you get to figure it out. You and your real family." His face flushed red, veins popping in his neck. He stood up trying to get taller, tougher, but it just made him look ridiculous. You're making a scene, he spat. No, I said. I'm drawing a line. I walked away. Didn't even wait for the elevator. A few flights of stairs later, adrenaline still pounding, disbelief so thick I could taste it. Outside, the cool night air hit me like a shock. Crisp, sharp, a welcome slap. I loosened my tie and kept walking. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I wasn't walking back. I thought maybe that would be the end, a heated exit, some awkward apologies, and then things would go back to pretending everything was fine. But that night was only the beginning. The fallout was coming, hard and fast. And trust me, it wasn't going to be pretty because I'd finally said no. And when you stand up to people who've always taken you for granted, you're bound to rattle some cages. You'd think after walking out on that dinner, things might calm down, that maybe some apologies would come, a little acknowledgement that things got out of hand. But nope, what came next was a whole different kind of storm. Long after I'd made it home, still dressed in that suit, still holding the unopened bottle of champagne like some kind of ghost limb, my phone started lighting up. First up was a text from Mason. Dude, seriously? You couldn't have just paid the check and talked to me after? Then a message from Mom, dripping with disappointment. You embarrassed us in front of Brooke's family. Was that your goal? Revenge? And then, out of nowhere, my phone rang from an unknown number. It was Brooke. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it, hesitant but sincere. Hi, she said. I know we don't really talk, but can I ask you something? I was cautious, but I said sure. She asked if I really paid for everything, the deposit, the flowers, everything. There was a long pause on the line. Yeah, I said simply. I did. More silence. Finally, she told me something I wasn't expecting. They told my dad you offered to pay for it, said it was your idea. I blinked, frozen. I'd never offered. I just said yes when asked. They asked? Yes. Did you want to pay? No, I said slowly. I didn't expect anything back. I just didn't want to make a fuss. A sigh on the other end. My dad's furious. He thinks you volunteered as a kind gesture. She went on, telling me he was livid, said Mason, and my parents made him look like a fool. That they lied about who was footing the bill, treated me like a joke, then expected him to pick up the tab because of the deception. I'm not calling to get involved, Brooke quickly added. I just thought you should know. That call changed everything. Because now the repercussions weren't just inside my family. They'd spilled into Brooke's world, the very wedding plans, the people who were supposed to be on our side. And trust me, things didn't simmer down there. The next few days saw our family group chat blow up like a volcano. You know the one, the thread full of birthday wishes, blurry food pics, aunties reminding everyone to stay in touch. All quiet for a while, but now Krakatoa status. Mom, Eli, can we please talk? Call me. Mason, you really messed things up with Brooke's family. Dad, we need this to stop. Just apologize and move on. But I didn't reply. How could I? It wasn't just about the chair next to the trash or the bill I refused to pay. It was everything that came before, years of being treated like the family's emergency fund, their backup driver, the guy who was always there to pay but never really there for anything else. And now that I'd drawn a line, a boundary, I wasn't sure what they expected me to do. Brooke's father, he wasn't the type to take humiliation lightly. From what I heard through Trent, the guy who usually treated me better than most of them, Mr. Whitaker had a serious meltdown the night after the dinner. Apparently, he'd paid for Brooke's private schooling, helped to start her marketing firm, and had arranged what should have been the perfect engagement season. And then, bam, he finds out the groom's side lied about who paid for the venue, treated family like dirt, and then expected him to cover half the bill. That was it for him. According to Trent, at brunch the next day, Mr. Whitaker said something that stuck with me. If this is how they treat their own blood, what happens when you marry into it? Ouch. Yeah, that one landed like a freight train. The wedding was suddenly on pause. Pinterest boards disappeared. Brooke went back to her condo for a mental reset. My mom went into full damage control mode, sent me a long email, no text, no voicemail, an actual email which I'll admit surprised me. The subject line was simple, please. The body was 5 paragraphs, of sugar-coated manipulation, all about how they never meant to hurt me, how they never realized I felt excluded, how much it would mean to the family if I just meet with Mason and try to smooth things over. But here's the thing, there wasn't a single sorry in there, not one, just, we didn't realize. You misunderstood. Let's not let one silly night ruin what we've built. I stared at that last line for a while. What bond? The bond where I drove 3 hours on Christmas Eve to bring gifts because Mom said Mason wasn't in the right headspace? Or the bond where I canceled my trip to Spain 2 years ago because Dad needed surgery and they couldn't afford a nurse at home? Or the bond where I co-signed a loan on their second car without asking twice? The same car Mason borrowed and never returned. I left that email unread for days. 2 days later, I got a call from Aunt Karen, Mom's sister. That was unexpected. She's not exactly warm and fuzzy. Think sharp, non-nonsense businesswoman who runs a pretty successful interior design firm, always carrying that barely hidden judgment like a second skin. We hadn't spoken in over a year. Eli, she said, I heard about the dinner. Of course you did, I said dryly. I'm not calling to scold you, she was quick to say. I just want to say it's about time someone shook the tree. That caught me off guard. She sighed. Look, I know how your parents are. Always brushing things under the rug, always pretending everything's perfect on the surface. They've leaned on you too much for too long. And Mason, he's always gotten away with treating you like some side character. For the first time, someone in my family saw me not as a checkbook or punching bag, but as a person. I was quiet for a moment and said, I appreciate that. She sighed again. Your mom called me yesterday, asking if I'd talk some sense into you. I raised an eyebrow. And what'd you say? I told her you didn't need sense. You needed space. And maybe it's finally time they learned how to stand without using you as scaffolding. Her words were like a breath of fresh air. Finally, a voice that wasn't asking me to shrink down, to soften, to play nice. That night, I got yet another message. This one was from Mason. Mason, bro, it read. Brooke's dad just canceled the deposit on the venue. Says we're not aligned in values. Fix this, please. I didn't reply that night. It hit me then. He still didn't get it. Still saw me as some tool, a wallet with a heartbeat. That's when I made my decision it wasn't the fix they expected. After all the chaos from the dinner fallout, after the texts, the calls, and all the judgment, I hit a moment where things shifted inside me. It wasn't overnight and it wasn't a sudden epiphany. It was like the slow burn of realization that I didn't have to be the one holding everything together anymore. Not if that everything wasn't really mine to hold. You see, the family group chat didn't just blow up, it started to feel like a battlefield. Messages flying back and forth, some in desperation, some tagging me to talk this out or meet up and fix things. But I stayed quiet. I didn't have the words they wanted to hear, and honestly, I didn't want to pretend anymore. Then came an unexpected call. Aunt Karen, Mom's sister, someone I hadn't spoken to in ages. If you think the typical family drama involves only parents and siblings, think again. Aunts and uncles have their own opinions and biases, and hers was sharper than most. I heard about the dinner, Eli. She said straight up, no sugarcoating. Of course you did, I replied, my voice a little rough. I'm not here to lecture you, she went on. I just want to say, it's about time someone shook the tree in that family. I was taken aback. No one else had spoken that way, especially not someone so close by blood. She sighed and told me she'd seen how my parents always brushed things under the rug, how the family pretended everything was picture perfect on the surface, while all the cracks festered underneath. And they leaned on you for too long, she said. Mason's always gotten away with treating you like a side character in your own family's story. I stayed quiet for a moment, overwhelmed by the truth in her words. For the first time in a long time, someone on my side acknowledged the quiet weight I'd been carrying. I thanked her quietly. That conversation lingered with me like fresh air after being underwater. She told me that Mom had actually called her recently, asking if she could talk some sense into me. I raised an eyebrow, curious if she'd actually done it. I told her no, she said without hesitation. You don't need sense. You need space. Maybe it's time the family learns how to stand without using you as their scaffolding. That line struck a chord deeper than anything before. For years, I'd been the support beam that no one thanked but everyone leaned on, the scaffolding holding up relationships and moments that never really included me. It hit me. I'd been giving so much, but getting so little. Not love or respect, just the weight of expectations. That realization didn't make things easier overnight, but it gave me the strength to finally let go of what wasn't mine to hold. I wasn't just the family's fallback plan anymore. I was a person who deserved dignity and respect. Later that night, Mason sent me a message, desperate, pleading in a way that made my chest tighten. Bro, Brooke's dad just canceled the venue deposit. Says we're not aligned in values. Fix this now. I stared at that message for a long time and then made a decision. He still didn't get it. He still thought I was some tool to be used, a wallet with a heartbeat, someone to bail him out when things got tough, but never someone who deserved real family. So I took control not in the way he expected. I logged into the shared account Mason had been using. It wasn't much, couple $1,000 left untouched. It was money I'd left alone for years, out of a stale sense of loyalty. That night, I moved every dollar into a new private savings account, a place they didn't know about and a place only I could access. A little while later, I called the bank and closed the joint account Mason had used for his gym membership and Spotify subscriptions. I didn't want to be the credit line or backup plan anymore. When Mason called me 4 times in a row the next morning, I didn't pick up right away. Eventually, I answered and heard panic in his voice. My card's bouncing, man, he blurted. Says the account doesn't exist. I was calm. I closed it. He stammered, You can't. Just, I can't. I can. And I did. Because at that moment I realized I didn't have to be the one covering the tracks or cleaning up the mess anymore. I looked him square in the eye on the phone and said, You told me I wasn't family, remember? You don't get to use my money if I'm not even allowed at the table. There was silence, then a charge. You're jealous, he said, switching tactics like he always did. You hate that I got the attention. You're throwing a tantrum because Brooke's dad took my side. I laughed, actually laughed. No, Mason. You really think he's on your side? Only silence followed. I said, Don't worry, man. You'll figure something out. You always do. Maybe Mom can open a line of credit in your name again. Or maybe Brooke's dad can teach you how to stand on your own. And then I hung up. That night, I got an email from Brooke's subject line. I think we need to talk. I stared at the screen for a while. The subject line sounded heavy, like the start of a chapter I wasn't sure I wanted to open. But my curiosity pushed me to read it. Brooke wrote about how the dinner had been awkward, how she hadn't fully realized how I'd been treated until everything came crashing down. She said she'd been so wrapped up in planning her perfect night that she'd missed the bigger picture. She admitted her dad was furious, not just about the money, but about the principle of it. He'd said, if they can publicly humiliate someone who supported that entire night, then I need to seriously reconsider who I'm marrying into. She didn't sugarcoat it. Mason had tried to downplay everything at first, said it was a misunderstanding, said I'd insisted on paying and left early because of work. But once her dad saw screenshots of the invoice and talked to the restaurant, the story crumbled. Brooke wrote, Honestly, you're the only one who reacted with any dignity. Then she said something that stopped me in my tracks. I ended the engagement last night. No fluff, no excuses, just the truth. That moment, that one night, pulled back a curtain I didn't know was hanging over their eyes. It revealed a pattern of entitlement, of messed up family dynamics, and outright disrespect. And it made me realize one thing clearly. Sometimes the hardest fights are the ones worth fighting. So after that turning point, I knew I had to make some big changes, not just in how I felt, but in what I actually did. It wasn't about making a scene or punishing Mason. It was about reclaiming my own life and saying, enough is enough. That night, I took a deep breath and logged into the joint bank account. Mason had been using the one linked to his Spotify, gym memberships, all that stuff he hadn't bothered to close when he moved out. Not a fortune, just a couple $1,000 I'd quietly left untouched over the years, mostly out of loyalty or habit. I moved the entire balance to a new private savings account, one only I had access to. It was my money, kept safe from me. Then I called the bank and officially closed the joint account Mason had been freely spending from. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because I finally realized I wasn't their financial safety net anymore. I wasn't the backup plan or the nice guy who would cover every mess silently. I was done cleaning up after people who treated me like I was invisible. The next morning, Mason blew up my phone with calls 4 times in a row. When I finally answered, his voice was frantic. My card's bouncing, he said. The account doesn't exist. I stayed calm. That's because I closed it. He stammered and protested, but I cut him off. You told me I wasn't family, remember? You can't use my money if I'm not allowed at the table. He tried to pin it on me, jealousy, resentment, all of it, but I just laughed. No, Mason, this isn't about jealousy. It's about respect. And just like that, I walked away from being the side character in their story. Because sometimes cutting ties isn't about ending relationships, it's about starting to respect yourself. After everything that unfolded, the dinner, the fallout, the family drama, I wasn't sure what to expect next. But the next message that showed up on my phone changed the whole game. It was an email from Brooke. The subject line was simple but heavy. I think we need to talk. I stared at that screen long before clicking open because I knew what that meant. Something big was coming. Brooke's email was longer than I expected. It was polite, formal, but you could feel the weight behind her words, the tone of someone unraveling the perfect life she thought she was building. She started by saying she understood how awkward and painful the dinner had been, that she hadn't realized what I was really going through until it all fell apart. She confessed she'd been so caught up in planning the perfect engagement night that she missed the bigger picture, how I had been left out and treated unfairly. Brooke's dad was furious, not just about the money or the lies in the billing, but about the principle of it all. He told her, if they can publicly humiliate the very person who funded and supported this entire night, then I need to seriously reconsider who I'm marrying into. She laid it out plainly. Mason had gone from brushing it off as a minor misunderstanding to his story falling apart once her dad saw the invoices and talked directly to the restaurant. Mason had explained away my actions, said I insisted on paying, that I was shy and left early because of a work emergency. But the truth came out when the waiter confirmed the actual details. Brooke wrote, honestly, you're the only person who reacted with any dignity through all of this. Then came the part that hit me the hardest. She said she ended the engagement just like that, no fluff, no drifting around it. She said the whole situation pulled back the curtain on behaviors she'd previously overlooked, the casual entitlement, the lies, the disrespect, and how Mason talked about me behind my back while downplaying everything. She admitted her concerns had been minimized by Mason and my parents, brushed aside as just Eli being sensitive. But Brooke saw through it all. She said, you were the only one with real integrity. Reading that email, I felt a mix of emotions, sadness, relief, and a strange kind of closure. The dinner wasn't just a bad night, it was the moment everything broke open. Brooke ended the note with a line that stuck with me. She said she wasn't trying to pit herself against Mason or my family, but she wanted me to know how much she respected how I handled myself. It was more than I expected or maybe even deserved. That email marked the end of one chapter. By pulling back the curtain, Brooke didn't just end her engagement. She also exposed a family dynamic that I'd tried for years to ignore or fix alone. Sometimes the people we hope will see us the most are the ones who don't. And sometimes you have to find your own dignity in the fallout, even if it means walking away from what you thought was your family. Looking back on everything, it's clear now how much that night changed me. It wasn't just about the folding chair or the bill I refused to pay. It was about finally waking up to what I deserved: respect, dignity, in a place where I'm seen, not just tolerated. For years, I tried to be the quiet backbone for my family. I kept my head down, did my part, helped with bills and favors, and hoped that one day I'd be included for who I really am, not just what I could give. But hoping only got me so far. That dinner was the moment the illusion shattered. When Mason pointed to that chair beside the trash can, it made something inside me break free. I realized I had been shrinking myself to fit a role that wasn't mine to play. I didn't have to be the invisible sibling, the one who quietly carries everyone else's weight while getting nothing back. Walking away from that room that night wasn't just an exit, it was a statement, a line drawn in the sand, and it changed everything. Sure, the fallout was painful, the text, the family drama, the end of a wedding, but sometimes losing what you thought was family is the beginning of finding your real people, the ones who see you, respect you, show up for you, not just when it's convenient or when you're useful. This story isn't just about a bad dinner or a failed engagement. It's about boundaries, self respect, and the courage to stand up for yourself, even when it feels like you're standing alone. If there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this: don't settle for being an afterthought. Don't let people define your worth by what you give rather than who you are. Sometimes the hardest step forward is stepping away, and that's okay, because when you do, you make space for something better. Thanks for listening. I hope this story reminds you to fight for your own seat at the table.